Okay, welcome to the third lecture in the course. I actually, when like recapping last year, yesterday, I made a decision that because in the recordings of this lecture, I said that I must split this into more lectures because it was like this all the time and there were no room for questions and it was like really clogged. So I have made some changes today. There are two lectures booked today, one now until lunch and one after lunch. However, the one after lunch, I will postpone that to next week. And today we could like focus on this first lecture. If it ends like at 2, fine. Then we have an hour of questions if you want to get help with something. So we will have like an extra tutoring this afternoon as well. The deadline for the first assignment is next week. And I said that we were to have 3 oral hearings in the course. We've changed that as well. We only will have 2 oral hearings. We will have 1 oral hearing for the second assignment and 1 for the third assignment. So the first assignment will not have an oral hearing, it will only be a hand-in, so that when the deadline comes, you should make sure that you have followed the instructions for how to hand in the assignment, and we will have a look at it and give you feedback, and that feedback will be given to you over GitHub. So you will get the feedback like as an issue on GitHub. So probably you will get a notification on your email that someone has raised an issue on your GitHub repository. If you don't, just make sure that you look on a regular basis. But I think you should get a notification if you haven't turned them off. So only 2 oral hearings. The theoretical part that is a part of the first assignment, we will kind of ask some of those questions on the second assignment. So you need to read up on the theories surrounding HTML as well. But not too many questions though. We should the first oral hearing should have been next week on Wednesday. But because we don't have an oral hearing on Wednesday, I will be able to split this lecture into 2. So that's part of the reason as well. Questions regarding that part of the course? Yeah?
I will be missing the second lecture here. So is it okay to watch YouTube video? Will you have the same content?
So the question is, I missed the second lecture. Is it possible to just watch the YouTube or is it different? It's exactly the same. We record everything. So the lectures are streamed and recorded. You can do whatever you like. You could like, if you're behind or you want to work in advance, you could use the YouTube recordings for that. However, just be sure that when you look at the course page, you have different dates. So you have the 2016 version being online right now, and I'm adding the 2007 version as we go along. Yeah. So feel free to do whatever you like. And I mean, this half an hour before this lecture starts, it's just a tutoring and help lecture. So if you need help, you can always attend on those. We have also added on Fridays, because some of you had to buy us in the UML course this morning. So we added on Fridays at 9, I think, there is an additional tutoring pass as well. So, but on that one, we don't have a lecture room booked. So we will be in Kalmar. You write your Skype IDs in the Slack channel and we will call you over Slack and we will do it that way. Or call you over Skype, I should say. Eventually we will use Slack for communication as well, but we need a paid plan for that, and that's up and running soon, I hope.
Is it only possible over Skype?
Huh?
Do we only have to do it over Skype?
Yeah.
Because I don't have Skype.
So if you have Linux, it could be like a problem. We could always find an alternative way. So, I mean, we could communicate over Slack, and we could find another way. Yeah. Skype is a little bit problematic as well, because some is using Skype for Business and some is using the old regular Skype, and those are not compatible in certain ways. So we will try to move away from Skype eventually. Some of you have noticed that you are not able to publish on GitHub. So when you push your code, your HTML to Git and GitHub, the code will not show up on GitHub pages, and you only get a 404. We are resolving that issue right now. We need to do a manual setting on each and every one's account, but we cannot do that until you've pushed at least one file to your repository. So if you're just working locally, please just push what you have so that you have files in GitHub, because then we could activate GitHub pages for you. Okay? Right then. So today we are leaving, like, as I said, HTML and CSS is not the main focus of the course. That's only a must-have, because every web developer needs to know basic HTML and CSS. However, if you're supposed to work as a web designer, for instance, you will probably have to do a lot more read up on especially CSS before you can make a living in that business. But we're, as developers, we need to know HTML and CSS to be able to create applications. So that's why it's a small, whoa. What happened there? So that's why it's a small part of the course. The big part of this course is JavaScript and the ability to add interactivity to our pages, or build applications, just like you are used to build applications in Java or whatever. So, and as a prerequisite for this course, you have the some kind of programming course in an object-oriented language. I guess for most of you it's Java. Hands up, how many has programmed in Java before? We kind of did this poll the last time. Yeah, the majority. C#. You are allowed to raise your hand several times if you like. PHP. C++. Okay. C even. Haskell.
Not yet.
Not yet. A little bit. Yeah. Oh, okay. You're a couple. Erlang. Golang. Assembly. Yeah. Well, if we go back to assembly, that is as far we could possibly get from JavaScript, I would say. I mean, the common picture of JavaScript is that it's this or if we go back 10 years, it's like this toy language that you kind of make things spin in the browser or make silly things in the browser. This has changed a lot during the last, I should say, maybe 10, 12 years or so. Today, JavaScript is regarded as a real programming language. It's always been a real programming language, but it hasn't always been seen as a real programming language. And the development of JavaScript, the language, is really serious, and it's fast, and there is a lot of things happening in the JavaScript community. To be able to bridge between the languages that you have and JavaScript, we will have to look at the basic things in the language. I will not do this. I mean, we will go over the things, how to declare a variable, for instance, but we will do that in a way that suits you that already know what a variable is and how to assign variables. So I will focus on the differences between JavaScript and mostly Java. Because if we look at Java and C++ and C# and PHP, those languages all stem from the same kind of background. that being C in the beginning. Whereas JavaScript comes from a totally different stem. And JavaScript borrowed the syntax from Java. So under the hood, JavaScript is a totally different language than Java, but looking at it, just visually, looking at the code, it kind of looks like Java. And this is a bit problematic because you might be fooled in thinking that it under the hood works as Java, but it doesn't. So we will kind of look at the differences today and next week. After that, after those two lectures, we will focus on JavaScript in the browser. But right now, we will focus on JavaScript as a language. You can run JavaScript in the browser. You can run it on a Raspberry Pi. You can run it like on a server. You can run JavaScript pretty much everywhere. You can run JavaScript inside of Adobe PDF documents. So JavaScript is kind of a versatile language that you can run just like Java in many different environments. So we will focus on the language today, and then focus on the runtime environment being the web browser, because that's kind of the biggest utility, or one of the bigger utilities for JavaScript today. Okay, let's switch to that view and the first slide. So this is how you hopefully will experience JavaScript. First of all, you can never have a JavaScript lecture without having a GIF, animated GIF. That's like if you go to a conference, if there is not an animated GIF, that is probably not a JavaScript lecture. So those guys over here, they are like, and girls maybe, are programming in Java. This will be you programming in JavaScript. So you will see that Java is kind of holding your hand all the time, just telling you how to program, and you have a clear set of rules of how to do things all the time. In JavaScript, you can do things however you like, more or less. You can do things, for instance, if you want to use classes, you can kind of do that in JavaScript in 3-4 different ways. But you can also not use classes at all. So some of you will absolutely love JavaScript. Last year, some came from a background in Java, and they took those courses, and now they're working as web developers with JavaScript in Växjö. Some of you will absolutely hate this. That's fine. Then you know why you hate it, because when you've taken this class, you will kind of get a feel of what JavaScript is. Some of you would like to have this more walled garden that is Java, that kind of tells you the rules. In later years, the development of JavaScript has progressed, and today many of the features that were lacking compared to, for instance, Java has been implemented in JavaScript as well, and I will mention those as we go. Looking at the timeline for JavaScript, looks kind of like this. It was invented back in '95. Remember what I said with the web being like all this, just Microsoft adding stuff and other browsers, Netscape just adding stuff to the browser, kind of making Tim Berners-Lee little bit angry. So when Netscape eventually came and said to the V3C, the standard committee, that, we have this idea. Can't we add like this JavaScript that we have tried in Netscape and like Internet Explorer have implemented in Internet Explorer, that is called Liveström, because Microsoft weren't allowed to copy, or, okay, JavaScript in the beginning was developed by Brandon Eich, and he worked at the time at Netscape, I think. And Netscape implemented JavaScript so that you could like program in the browser. That was a really big thing back then. And Microsoft looked at this and, oh, we want to do that as well. But we can't just like, because Java, the name Java is under the protection of, what was it back then? That Sun Microsystems, that owned the name Java. And so Microsoft couldn't just take the name, so they copied the language, they reversed engineered it down to the perfection. Every error in the language they copied. So and they named it Livescript and implemented it in Internet Explorer. So when V3C was formed and we started to talk about standards and coming together and help each other, they said to V3C, oh, we have JavaScript and Livescript, can we like standardize it on V3C? And V3C wasn't too happy about how those organizations had behaved in the past, so they said, no, it has nothing to do with us, just go away. So they had actually they looked to Europe and an organization called ECMA. I think it's like, I can be so wrong right now. I think it's from Czechoslovakia. I don't know if it's Czech Republic or Slovakia, but I think it's in that region as well, or somewhere in that region. And they said, yeah, sure, we can do this. Java is kind of hard of a name because Sun has the rights to Java, so we can't call it JavaScript, so we will call it ECMAScript because ECMA was the name of the organization. So JavaScript and ECMAScript and Livescript, they are all the same thing. It's like the language JavaScript. However, the standard is still has the name ECMAScript, and we, on a daily basis, we just say JavaScript. And the reason why it's called JavaScript and nothing else, I messed one thing up. Internet Explorer didn't call it Livescript, they called it JScript. Sorry. Livescript was the name that JavaScript had in the beginning. But they changed it because back in the 90s, Java was the savior. It had like arisen to make Java was supposed to do everything right. You should be able to use Java in built-in systems, on the web, everywhere. Java was the thing. And to be able to like attract money, they said, oh, let's name this language JavaScript because it's kind of like Java. Brandon Eich didn't want it to look anything like Java in the beginning, but he was kind of forced to make it look like Java. The saying goes that Brandon Eich, who created Java, he created it in, I think, 11 days. That is approximately so many days that you have for the first assignment. And he created the language that we know today as JavaScript. That's a pretty good job to do on 11 days, creating a whole new language. Of course, he was quite into language creation or working with different languages. So he combined the best of what he thought was out there. However, if you create something in 11 days, you will end up with bugs. And he did. So JavaScript has a lot of quirks built into the language, and you will like look at them and say, how the hell could someone do it like this? Just remember, okay, 11 days. He didn't have time to fix everything. He also constructed the language in a way that, remember, HTML and CSS became successful because it was easy for everybody to code in HTML and CSS. The browser would kind of fix things for you. He had this kind of notion as well when he created JavaScript, that the language should be easy for everyone to code. We shouldn't like get errors if we miss a semicolon, for instance. So semicolons was optional. And we don't have typed variables, for instance, where it's a loosely typed language. There are things like that he built in just to make it easier to grasp. But in the end, when it comes to professional development, those things might end up bad in the end. So nothing really happened between, I mean, people were starting to implement JavaScript in the browser. JavaScript were often used to like scroll texts and just make silly graphical things on the page. But in 2000 and was it 5 or 7, when the term AJAX was invented, that we could just send data between the server and the client, JavaScript kind of picked up, and the developers saw that, oh, we could actually build real applications using JavaScript and not only use it for those graphical things. So for the last 12 years, JavaScript has been rising in all statistics over the biggest or biggest languages in the world. Some will say that JavaScript is the most widely spread language nowadays because every unit out there has direct support for JavaScript if they have a browser installed. But I'm not sure about the statistics. And you can see that on the ECMAScript development as well. Nothing really happened until the late 2008, 9, something like that, when ECMAScript 5. This is like the first major good version of JavaScript. So after 5, you can see that, and especially the later years, there is a new version coming every year, and I think this will go on for quite a while. So the latest standard is the ECMAScript 8 or ECMAScript 2017. They changed like the form of the name in 2015 just to have the release named after the year, but they are often called ES8 as well. So be prepared to see both of those forms. ECMAScript 5 is like, that is totally implemented in every browser out there. Every modern browser has support for ECMAScript 5. When we go up to ECMAScript 6, yeah, you need to be on your watch, because some browsers don't implement all of the specifications, and you need to like check if every browser has support for the language features that you need. Of course, there are kind of preprocessors for JavaScript as well that will take your code and compile it to an ECMAScript 5 version. So there are tools like that if you really want to try out the latest features in the language. We will focus on ECMAScript 6 mainly in this course. There are some news in ES7 and 8, nothing really major, mostly like handling strings and added functionality regarding that, and some syntactic sugar as well. We will look more at the APIs when we get into the browser and the news there. So it's, I mean, okay, so do I install ECMAScript 5 on my computer and like compile my files, or how does it work? No, because you need a runtime environment for ECMAScript to work. So if you're using the browser is the runtime environment, and you have to adapt to the browser manufacturer implementing features from the ECMAScript standard. Of course, you can look at sites and see exactly what features are installed in which versions of the browsers. When we start out, we will use Node, and Node is a platform for... Oh, I'm not using the computer, and it just will sleep. Node is a platform for running JavaScript as well. Node is implementing the V8 engine. V8 engine is the same JavaScript engine that is in Chrome, because it's open source. But doesn't mean that the same features are in the browser that you have in Node. But if you install the latest version of Node, you will get good support for most of the features in the ECMAScript language, however, not all of them. So when you go about to install Node, I would recommend that you install the latest release, not the latest stable. The latest stable release you would probably run on the development or production server, but in your case, just install the latest possible version, and you will get the most features as possible from the ECMAScript standard. And that's as simple as just visit Node. I'm not sure about the address, but just search Node, and you will find the homepage, and you just a one-click installer. So it's pretty neat. So okay, I could just show you that if we. Oh, do I need to do that all the time? Well. I've installed Node on my computer. I'm using a small program called N, which is a node manager tool. If you install this one, you could like easily upgrade to newer versions of Node. The latest one I have is 8.4, and you can change Node versions. But that is probably if you're working on different projects with different versions of Node. I'm just using it to be able to install the latest one easy. So I've installed Node, and you could just write Node in your bash like this, and now we can start like doing writing code. So 1 + 2 is 3. So this is, I mean, I'm not sure you can do this in Java, right? You can just start Java and start writing code and get a result. You need to like encapsulate in classes and have a more structured environment. And so this is kind of a neat feature with JavaScript. You can write even in the URL field of the browser and start executing, or opening the console in the browser and start executing JavaScript if you like. But in Node it's like this. However, this is only for test purpose. So I will show you how to code in files in just a second. In Java and most other languages, you have types like integers, strings, floats, and whatever. In JavaScript, we don't. We have a loosely typed language, meaning that if you declare a variable, that variable could be a number. You can assign it a string. You can assign it an object, a function, or whatever. It's loosely typed. It's not that JavaScript don't have types. It has. It's just loosely typed. And there are types, but they are more generic than you are used to. So we have the type number, for instance. A number is floats and integers and whatever. It's just a 64-bit number. We have, I would actually try to do this today because it's quite hard to see on the projector. So if I paste it here. If you write type of 42, you will get the result number. So 42 is of the type number, 3.14 is a number, it's not a float, it's just a number. If you write a string, it's a string, so you will recognize that. You have booleans, true and false. They are of type boolean, so we have that one as well. We have something called functions, which are essentially objects, but I will get back to that. Never mind that, writing that's also a function. It's called an arrow function, and you might be familiar with lambda expressions in other languages. We have something that we use a lot that's called objects, and we have arrays. And arrays, if you write type of on an array, it will show up as an object as well. So not too many types. We have some other special ones as well. We have undefined, and we have null, and we have not a number and such, but those are kind of the basic types that you need to know. You don't need to know int 64 or whatever. So let's have a look at the number data type. As I said, it's a 64-bit numbers, which is big. They can be negative or positive, of course. You can express them in different ways. You have your arithmetic operators as you are used to, plus, minus, multiplication, division. Do you recognize this one?
Modulus.
Yeah, modulus. It's called modulus in Java. It's called the rest operator or remainder operator in JavaScript. It handles negative numbers in a different way than Java, but you could just use it as the modulus operator to check if something is even or odd, for instance. Works the same thing. And you have the parentheses as well, as you're used to. You have some special numbers, one called infinity, one called negative infinity. I rarely use them. If you have to use them, you're probably some kind of strange construction in your code. Not a number, because, okay, we can do an example. So I will, instead of coding in, or we could actually start off by coding in the terminal. So because we don't have types, if you were to do this, in Java, what would happen? Yeah, you would get an exception because, I mean, that's an int and that's a string, and you can't add an int to a string. However, in JavaScript, we can. So it will kind of recognize that this is a string, and it will do a concatenation instead, and adding the string 12 to the string hey, making the result 12 hey. However, if you do something like this, what's supposed to happen, you think? So you multiply 12 with hey. Hey, 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 12 times, the string of 12, something like that. Well, it's not a number. So this is a special type that is built in called not a number, because, well, that doesn't make sense. So you get not a number. Forgot one thing that I was supposed to say, but whatever. Yeah, not a number is poisonous, it's called. So if you have an equation and you get not a number into the equation, everything else will be poisoned by not a number, and the end result will be not a number. Of course, you can do things like, if we have this, what would happen now, you think? Oh, worked. So it tried to convert the string to an integer, and it worked. However, this is not good practice, trying to do this. So I would recommend, if the intent is that this should be an integer, you have this function called parseInt. For instance, there are many ways of doing this, but this is a better way of doing it, I think, because, okay, you're passing the one to an integer or a number, and you multiply it with 1. So, well, I'll get back to that. Strings, you know them as well. You can define a string with single quotations. I would say single quotations because it's easier. So single quotations or double quotations. However, the code standard for this course states that you are supposed to use the single quotation for strings. we are using a code standard called standard.js. You could check it up on the web page for it, with all the rules. I mean, when you go out and work on a company, you could write, as I said, you remember the dancing man. You can write JavaScript in so many ways, and everybody has their own style. But if you work on a company, that's not a good thing. If everybody keeps, like, some are using tab for indentation, and some are using spaces, and some are using the brackets starting at the end of the method, and some are using brackets on their own lines, and that would just be a mess in the code. So you need a code standard, and every company has a code standard, even if you're doing Java or JavaScript or whatever. We are using the standard.js code standard that are gaining ground. We have used Google's before. Airbnb's is really popular, but we've settled with standard.js because the rules in this one really suits the course. And it states that you should use single quotation marks. I'm not saying that is the best. I'm not saying that it's the worst. I'm just saying that the standard says so, and the course says so, and you need to comply. That's basically how it is. When you run, for instance, I think we have tests for some of our assignments. The tests will warn you if you have errors. And as you saw in my development environment here, I get some kind of problem with type of, and that is because I'm not compliant with the code standard. So expected an assignment or function call. I mean, this is meaningless because I never save the result. So the code standard will say, I mean, it's totally legal JavaScript. It's nothing wrong with the code, but we should do something like that if we want to use the type of operator. And now it says, oh, I isn't used anywhere. So that's the code standard complaining as well.
Could you use parentheses after type of?
Could I use parentheses after type of? Yes, like that.
Yeah, or like one without the white space.
No. So, well, yeah, if this were a function, it should look like that. However, the type of is an operator. So when you use an operator, you need to have a blank space. And this is all code standard. You could, in JavaScript, you could do whatever you like. But the code standard will tell you that it's wrong. So you need to comply with that. I've done this as well. So say if I had it like this. So when I save a file, it will automatically just correct small errors. I'm quite, as you are as well, used to doing things like that, adding a semicolon in the end. It's kind of in my bones, so when I write code, it just happens. And it will punish me every time I do that, but if I save, it will remove it. So, and I mean, semicolons or not, they actually doesn't add anything to JavaScript. Having semicolons, it's just one more character. There are some bugs that some situations where you can get a bug if you don't have a semicolon, but those cases, they are edge cases. You will never, almost never, be in a situation where you would need a semicolon. So for that reason, we are not using them, and the standard says to not use them. It will actually be a lot cleaner code when we start using arrow functions or lambda expressions, because you will not need to remember all semicolons on one-liners, for instance. We will see that later. Okay.
You will have to write like everything on the same line if you want it to be, I mean, every operation.
Yeah.
Like,
you can't split, like, you can't do things like that. You need to add it, because what will happen is that the interpreter will actually add a semicolon for you before running the code. So this would be that. which is totally legit code. It will run because type of nothing, it's nothing, and 42 is just run 42. It doesn't do anything, but it's legal code. So if you were to do something like this, you will end up with a bug. Yes. Don't split things up in lines. There are ways of doing that as well with like a backslash, I think, but it will warn for that as well. So there's no way of getting around it. I will link or have linked to a talk by, have anyone watched MPJ, Matthias Petter Johansson, on YouTube? He has a show called Fun Functions. I would recommend that. Just have a look. He's really good at what he's doing, and he has a rant regarding semicolons. He worked, I think he still does, on Spotify, and Spotify is using semicolons, but he doesn't like it. But he just complies to the standard that Spotify has. But on his videos, he's not using semicolons. I will link to the talk, or the talk is linked already to that rant. I will not dwell upon that anymore. You can concatenate strings, as you probably are used to. Just use the plus sign to concatenate two strings together. You can use the \n to make an escape sequence, \t for tab, and as you're probably all familiar with. Nothing strange there. Yeah, so what I should say is that number, string, Boolean, they are primitive data types. So if you were to do something like, I will erase this. You see? Oh, line number out of range. Requested 3. Only strange. What is this? But they will just keep coming, right? I'm not. That must be the. Yeah, whatever. If I do something like that, because this being a primitive data type, it will copy the value. It's not the reference type. The same with strings, booleans. However, arrays, objects, functions, they are all reference types. We will look more at that later. Booleans, nothing strange here, but you will see one thing. Yeah, let's make an example. Use this one instead then. Okay, do it like that then. I want to go to the top. Okay. Node. That didn't help. Clear node. Okay, now you see. If I were to do, okay, so you will have to answer. True or false? Yeah. Yeah. It's a little bit. Isn't it scary that that's true? Yeah. Is true or false?
True.
Ah, you're learning.
True. Of course.
Yeah. So I mean, you were pretty good, but you missed the last one. I'm always like, oh, what is happening? And that is because we are using the double equality that we are used to from Java. However, it doesn't work in the same way as Java because we have this loosely typed language. And because of that, we have 3 equal signs instead. This takes account the type. So in this case, that is false, which is a good thing because it's not the same thing. The string 1 is not the same thing as the number 1. And 1 shouldn't equals true. But it should, of course, equals 1. So using 3 equality characters when comparing is a best practice and something that you should do. I even think that the code standard will prohibit the use of double equality signs. So by using 3, you are comparing the type as well. So the type needs to match and the values need to match as well. Okay? That's one use. Of course, we have the not equality as well. So you use the bang equal equal. Never ever use equal equal and not equal. As you see, you can use like less than and larger than on strings as well. I'm not sure it's a good practice. It will like compare the first letters, the second, and so on. You have the logical operators and else and false as well. Nothing strange with them. Well, actually there is. Because in Java, I think this will always return true or false, right? The double and the double else will always return true or false. In this case, I think that else will return the truthy part of the comparison, which in this case is true. But, and I haven't prepared this, so now I will probably be wrong, but I think if you do something like hey, if you do something like that, it will return hey and not true. So it will return the truthy part. You can use this to like get default behavior. So if we have a variable called I that is undefined, we can let j equals I or Mr. Smith. So if I is undefined, it will return the truthy part, but if I were defined, it will return I. Or I could just write J, and J is Mr. Smith. So this is, in this case, this is often called the default operator. And you can do like the opposite thing with the AND operator, and it's called the guard operator. So if you have, you've probably been in a situation where you are comparing like my object dot hello. So if my object dot hello is defined, you're supposed to do something. We can do that like my ob dot hello dot is set. So okay, let me explain this one. So we have an object, my object, or think of it as an object in Java. You can look at this as Java. We have my object, and we need to use the function isSet, but the isSet can only be called if there is object hello inside of the object my object. This is quite usual in Java that you get an exception, or when I coded Java like 15 years ago, that you get an exception if you try to call is set and hello isn't an object. But by doing this construction, you can make sure that this one guards this one, so to speak. So if hello is set, it will return this part instead. So it's the opposite against or. So in this case, it's often called the guard operator because it guards the right side of the expression. But that's like edge cases, actually. Okay, we'll take a break. We'll take a 15 minutes break. And after the break, we will start looking at, what I already shown, variables and how to assign them. Okay, 15 minutes. Okay, so I got some questions during the break, so I think I could address them for everybody. First of all, when looking at the course webpage, you will find the exercises down here. This is exercises for part 2 of the course, and we could actually say that part 2 is kind of starting now with JavaScript. So these exercises are made so that you will get up to speed with JavaScript. They might be quite simple in the beginning, like this one, Tiny Tunes, is like concatenate 2 strings and return the result and such. But that is just to get you started. On many of the exercises you can find, in this case, a code solution, so you could compare your code to the solution. However, bear in mind, we haven't implemented a new code standard on the solutions yet, so they will probably have semicolons, for instance. Just bear in mind that they work the same way, the logic is the same, but we have the old code standard. In some of those, I have those extended recordings, so this bartboard, for instance. So in this one, I will code an example in the browser, and I will speak on the recording as well. So you can first try it for yourself, and then you can watch my recordings and solving this exercise. Same thing here. Notice the semicolons, and notice that I'm using Liveström, which was the IDE we used last year. And that takes me to the next point, and that is Visual Studio Code. So we have moved from Liveström, which is a Java program, kind of like Eclipse, and we have moved to Visual Studio Code, Microsoft Visual Studio Code. As we discussed in the break, Visual Studio Code is built or packaged with something called Electron, and Electron is a way of packaging web applications and running them on the desktop. So when you run Visual Studio Code, you're actually just using a web application masked as or disguised as a desktop application. If you scroll down on Electron, you will find other tools as well. Some of you know Atom, Slack, Discord, and so on. They are all Electron applications, which means they are written in JavaScript, HTML, and CSS from the beginning. And we are using Visual Studio Code, this one. Why do we use it? Well, first of all, Microsoft has always been really, really good in making developer tools that are great, like Visual Studio. However, Visual Studio has been only for Windows. But Microsoft has changed, made things open source, and Visual Studio Code is available for Mac, Linux, and Windows. It has a really good IntelliSense. It's a really stripped down editor, but you could add support for many different things, and you add support by using this extension tab. I've only installed 2 extensions, and you need to install one of them, and it's the JavaScript standard style. And it's this extension that makes it so that I could see all the things I do wrong compared to the standard or the code style. These code icons, this one is just to get some like fancy icons like JS for the JavaScript files and so on. It's just eye candy. You can, if you like, you can use Git and the connection to GitHub and push inside of Visual Studio with a graphical interface. I recommend you all to learn the basic commands in Git instead, because then you are not tied into a special IDE, because that will work everywhere. So learn your commands first, because there's always this thing with UIs that you can press something that you don't know what it does. It's harder to write a command that you don't know what it does. Okay, and we have an integrated terminal as well in Visual Studio Code. So if I open a project or open a folder in Visual Studio Code, I will also have the terminal point to that same folder in my file structure, which is a good thing because you don't need to do a lot of CD, yada, 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 to navigate. Okay, I'm not sure why I got this error before, but now it seems to work. So we will code in Visual Studio Code from now on. Questions? No? Okay. Automatic type conversion, I talked about this. Have a look at this example. Can I? No, I can't. That's not too good. So for the string 4 plus 3 plus 2 will equal 4, 3, 2. But if we do it the other way around, 4 plus 3 plus the string 2, it will equal 72. And that's because the arithmetic is read from left to right. So it will take 4, add 3, it's 7, and then it will concatenate with the string. So the result is 72. There is a lot of bugs concerning things like this. As I said before, try to avoid like concatenating strings and numbers, because it could be quite confusing when you're reading the code. But this is how it's done. It's called automatic type conversion. Okay, variables. So in Java, you're used to doing things like int e equals 0, telling the compiler that I want I to be an integer. In a loosely typed language, we do not need to tell the compiler or interpreter what type we are using. We're just telling it that we want a variable to store this value in. The classical way of doing that is using var for variable. And you can do this, and then we could like say that I should be a string, or like that. No, they're back. Why is that? Okay, so I've written a simple program. We create a variable I and assign 0. Then we change I from the 0 to hello, and then I log I. And console.log, it's just like, what is it, print line, something like that in Java, just to print it to the console. You run a program or a file by just writing node and the name of the file. And it will say hello. So this is completely valid. Of course, in Java on line 2, you would get an exception saying that you cannot assign a string to an integer. But it's not a problem in JavaScript. That doesn't mean that you should do things like this, like just changing the type all the time. Please don't. We also, and yeah, that's why. I'm completely forgot myself. So, okay, so var is the classical way of declaring variables. You've seen it. If you've looked at JavaScript code on the web, you see var all the time. In ECMAScript 5, I think it was, they introduced 2 new ways of declaring variables. It's let and it's const. Starting off with let. So when declaring a variable, like with var, in JavaScript you will get something called function scope. However, declaring variables in Java will give you something called block scope. Let me show you. If you do it like this, whatever. If true, it will be mad at, oh, I need to learn this new code standard. If true, var j equals, this is not good code, but it will show an example. Huh? See? Cannot live without them. And it fixed my spaces. So, if we run this in Java, what would happen? Would it work? No. Would J be accessible outside of the block? No. But of course in JavaScript it's different, so it works. And that is because variables declared with var have function scope instead of block scope. So this is the block, but in JavaScript, in this case, function scope is the whole file. So this is the same thing, and actually the interpreter will look at this code and it will rewrite it for you, and it will look like this. So, oh, it removed the undefined. I had the undefined here just to make like a point. So this is what happens under the hood. So it will hoist, it's called hoisting, it will hoist the variable as declaration to the top of the function. We will set it to undefined, and then it will assign it inside of the block. And I mean, as soon as you use var, you should know that this happens.
But what if you use let?
Yeah, and that is why you shouldn't use var. Because of this hoisting, and you're not used to working like this. So today, more or less, everybody's using let instead. So if we do the same thing, but we say let j equals 12, and run it, we get an exception. Just like in Java, because let has block scope. So it will not hoist the declaration to the top of the function. Okay? Of course, if we do something like that, it still works. That's the difference between let and var. Okay? What's up with const then? What is const? You think? Yeah. Do you think this will work? No. No. We'll get some kind of exception saying that you cannot change I because it's a constant. Well, happens sometimes you need to maybe, yeah, this is a classic. Okay, I need to use this pi in my application, and I declare it as a const. And if you're in C, I think you did something like you always had capitalized letters to say that it's a constant. This is not a typical way of using const. However, if we instead create an array like that, and then we do, call it R. So log okay, will that work? It's like 50-50, I think, if I look at you. No? Yes? Okay, hands up. Yes, it will work.
I think it'll work.
No, it will not work. Yeah. More. Let's try it. It will work. And that is because what is constant is an array is a reference type. So the reference, this R will reference an array in memory. And as long as we don't change the reference, we could like add things to this object because the reference is the same. However, we cannot reassign this to a new. Even if it were to have the same numbers, it's still a new array and it will not work. Okay. Yeah, you can pop as well. So you will probably, I would recommend, I'm pretty bad at, because const is pretty new and I'm used to using var all the time, I would recommend you still to use const on reference types. Because if you create an object, you probably want that object to be stored in that variable and not change. And if you, especially when we come to declaring functions or methods, as it's called maybe in Java, when declaring those, you will not change them either. So you can have const there as well. And use let for everything else, and you're fine. If you're using var, please be prepared for, on an examination assignment, for instance, to be able to explain why you are using var and how the hoisting works. Well, you should be able to explain hoisting anyways, but we will be a little bit crueler to you if you use var, I think, on the examination. Okay, questions about this? I think it's pretty obvious and if you're used to variables in other languages.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you create a variable with a let, but before an if loop, and then inside the if you call that variable, that still works, right?
Yep. So I need to repeat the question. So if I do something like let I equals 12, if through I equals sol log I plus plus, for instance. Yeah, it will work. And what will be the result if I console log I here? Yeah, so you know your plus plus and your 12, 13. And what happens if I do it like that? Have Jonas drilled you on this? 13, 13, thank you. Yeah, so that's the same. However, using the plus plus and the plus plus operator in JavaScript has been seen as not good practice, and that's because of a guy called Douglas Crockford. So Douglas Crockford is this like JavaScript evangelist. He's like, you will find in the JavaScript community, you will find memes about Douglas Crockford everywhere. Like there are sayings like, if you pollute the global scope, Crockford eats a kitten, and they're like, he's like kind of the god, even though Brendan Eich invented the language. Crockford is the more outspoken one. He's in the standards committee as well, working for PayPal now, I think. And he has written a book called JavaScript, The Good Parts. It's like this thick. And the JavaScript literature we normally use is this thick, and this is like the good parts. So he's kind of explaining why certain things in the language isn't a good construction, and he has a rant about the plus plus, because and the reason is many developers don't know the difference between plus plus and a plus plus. You did, obviously, but not everybody does. So it's better to always use that construction instead. So you will probably see that many examples doesn't use ++, and that's because in the JavaScript community it's kind of bad practice. However, the code standard allows it, so please do if you like. I will not judge you in any way. There are reserved names, of course, in JavaScript. You don't need to know them by heart, but as you know, in Java, when you write one of them, you kind of feel that this isn't right. Like naming something this, that would be a problem, for instance. A good thing is that when Brendan constructed the language, he like reserved the word class, even though he didn't have classes in JavaScript. We do now. And so it was a good thing he did. Otherwise, we would have to find another keyword, I guess. But those are reserved, nothing strange there. I will just go over those super quick because you know them. And you will see, here you can see that it's influenced by Java because it looks pretty much the same as Java. So control flows, if statements, we've already used them. Let's see what the code standard says about this one. I haven't tried it yet. Ah, pretty good. I think not. Ah, I have. I have some. Okay, my code editor is set to use the indentation of 4 instead of 2, but otherwise it worked. So if statements, else if, you know them, right? No need to dwell upon that. Switch statements. I kind of find switch being this construction in the language that you use in programming courses and then never use after that. So, I mean, it's quite common to have a introduction to programming and you go over switch and you have these assignments that you are supposed to implement with switch. But then you never use them after that. There are things to look out for. For instance, this fall through mechanism. So if you don't have a break in a case, it will fall through to the next case and the next and the next and the next, making bugs in code. Some ninjas try to like take advantage of this and write cool code, and it's really hard to interpret it. And well, I'm not a huge fan of switch. Use them if you like. The conditional operator. I found this expression, ternary. Can someone pronounce that? Ternary. Is it the name of that operator? Okay, I didn't know that. I've always said conditional operator, but it's ternary operator. Okay. You're used to that one as well. Perhaps if you come from, I'm not sure if it's implemented in C++. It is? Okay. In C? Assembly? No. So what it says is it's the conditional operator, it's the question mark and the colon. And if this part is truthy, it will return the first before the colon. If it's false, it will return this one. So it's nice if you want to like do things like this to test if something is odd or even, for instance. But it's there. Please use it if you like. While statements look exactly the same as in Java, and do while as well, I guess. I haven't been coding Java since 2000. And I had a course in Java actually in 2003, I think. I haven't opened Eclipse since. So there's probably happened a lot of things in the language that I don't know. Please correct me if so. If I have like have the wrong picture of Java. For loops, the programmer's favorite language construction. I guess or hope that all of you know your for loops by heart and love them. Well?
They still use semicolons though.
Huh?
They use semicolons inside the parentheses.
Whoa. Yeah. Those are the only semicolons that are in the language, or that you need to use. Yeah. Good thing they didn't remove those. That would be quite ugly. Good luck in interpreting that one. Yeah, they use the semicolons here as well. I'm really fond of for loops. I use them a lot, used them a lot. However, since I'm teaching new students as well that haven't programmed before, and this construction is really hard to learn in the beginning. It's like a lot of things to get wrong. It's doing 3 things at once. And it turns out in the newer versions of JavaScript, you will see that you will actually not need to use for loops anymore, or as much anymore. So okay, let's skip in advance. We have time. Think. Yeah, we will continue after lunch. So I've already shown you how to create arrays in JavaScript. It's really simple. It's just using the brackets and you create an array. So if we have an array of, say, all of those, and you were to sum them up, if you are using a for loop, you will probably do something like output dot length, and just do something like that, and then log the sum. Have I missed something? Someone is shaking their head.
The index array. You need the array index.
Yep.
So you know
Sorry. Yeah, of course. Like that. Is it correct? Yeah, let's say it's okay. But there is a lot of things going on. So what I'm thinking about, should it be less than the length, or should it be less than equal with the length? I cannot forget to do this. I mean, for a new programmer, it's quite a lot to take in. And even for me, I need to think about it, even though this is the most classical of examples. However, there are really neat functions in JavaScript, ECMAScript. I think it's 6, maybe 5, that introduced a lot of iterator functions. So I will show you how to do this now, and we will have the discussion after lunch why this works. And I really hope I will get this right. So we take the output. Someone said something like for each. We could start off with a for each. So for each number, then I need to do something like could do like that. For each number, och att den returnerar. Vi testar. Yep. So this did the same thing as that whole for loop, actually. And we could even shorten this more and use something called reduce. Current previous sum number plus equals sum, and I think we can remove that one. Let sum equals that one. I hope I got it right. Yeah. So what we're using here is something called iterator functions that iterate over objects or arrays or whatever you can iterate upon, using the reduce method that will like loop every element, remembering the old value, and what I do here is just adding the old value all the time. However, this looks kind of strange, and this is called arrow functions. And arrow functions is something I will introduce after the break. What I wanted with this one was just to say that, okay, for loops are the same. However, you will probably not need to use them as much as you are used to. You are allowed to if you like, but there are better constructions in the language that actually makes the code easier to read as well, and you will get fewer bugs. Someone would raise their hand and say, well, the iterator functions, they are pretty slow. This one is faster, and it's even faster if I do a ++ I, because the compiler will kind of do some magic, blah, blah, blah. And then you have been to too many courses in compiler technology and stuff, where you need to think about where you will use JavaScript. You will not use JavaScript when calculating quantum physics. You will use JavaScript for like handling data, transforming stuff, and you will probably have an internet connection somewhere in the middle. I++ and ++I, in comparison to sending a package over the internet, it's like a drop of water compared to an ocean. It's like, don't even think about it. If you, at a workplace, write something really cutting edge, and you notice that you have some performance issues in part of your code, okay, fine, break it down. You will probably find that you have some kind of construction that is not suitable for what you're trying to do, and work with that. Don't try to do premature optimization, because you will like only focus on microseconds here and microseconds there, and then you will miss the seconds in other parts of the program. So just to sum up, there are better ways of doing things in JavaScript than using the for loops, even though for loops might be a microsecond faster than, or millisecond even, faster than using an iterator function. It will probably consume a little bit more less memory, who knows? Probably the built-in functions will actually be better, because someone has optimized them, and the compiler can optimize them for their needs. So I don't know, I don't care actually. Okay, so after the break, the lunch break actually, we will have a look at, we will continue with iterations. We will start looking at functions and the more interesting parts of the language. We've just touched upon the more basic parts right now. So see you after the break at 1:15.